In the heart of the American South lies the quiet town of Greystone, a place where the air smells of earth and rain, and the distant thunder often whispers secrets of the past. For generations, the people of Greystone have lived by an ancient legend. Every time the first rain of the season falls, it brings with the spirit of the Rainkeeper. But the townsfolk know more than just the stories. They know that the Rainkeeper isn't just a guardian of their crops. He's a keeper of debts long forgotten. And when he comes to collect what is owed. And what the people of Greystone don't know is at this time, the Rainkeeper has come for something more than a simple promise. It's come for Amelia, a young woman new to the town. Amelia has always dismissed the old folk tales as nothing more than superstition. But as the first storm of the season approaches, something in the air shifts. Whispers of an ancient pact, forgotten by time, begin to haunt her every step. Strange dreams, faint whispers in the rain, and eerie visions lead her down a path she never asked to walk. The spirits of Greystone's past are restless. And the Rainkeeper? He's been waiting. Amelia doesn't know it yet, but she's bound to a debt forged by her ancestors, and the time for repayment has come. The rain will not stop until she pays the price. What will Amelia sacrifice to end the storm? And what will she discover about herself in the process? The storm is coming, and with it, a truth darker than the midnight sky. Will you dare to listen to the storm's tale? The Rainkeeper. Chapter 1. The Whispering Storm. Amelia stepped off the bus, her boots sinking slightly into the muddy ground as she looked up at the old town of Greystone. Nestled in the rolling hills of the American South, Greystone felt like something out of another time. The streets were narrow, lined with old brick buildings, their windows clouded with years of dust and stories untold. A low, constant hum of cicadas filled the air, and the sky was painted a deep, stormy gray, as though it had been waiting for something, waiting for her. She'd only just arrived, a newcomer to this sleepy little town. The whispers of its history, of its strange customs, and the odd behaviors of its people were the stuff of small-town legend. But Amelia, ever the skeptic, had no interest in local ghost stories or tales of spirits and old debts. She had a new life to build, far away from the noise of the city, far away from everything that had once been hers. She pulled her suitcase behind her, eyes scanning the rows of old houses. But something in the air felt different, a shift, the heavy scent of rain, of earth, mixed with a strange, almost electric charge that seemed to hang between the buildings. As she reached the edge of town, the distant rumble of thunder echoed. Amelia paused, glancing up at the sky. The clouds, once soft and white, had thickened into a dark mass, swirling ominously above her. Her heart quickened. It had been days since she'd seen any sign of rain. The locals had talked about the first rain in hushed tones when she arrived. The older folks seemed to regard it like a religious event. Every year, without fail, the rain would come, bringing with it the same story, the same legend. The Rainkeeper, they called him, the town's protector, the spirit of a storm, who came to ensure the crops would grow and the harvest would be plentiful. At least, that's what they said. Amelia had rolled her eyes at the story when she first heard it. What kind of town believed in a rain god, much less a spirit that walked among the living? But the longer she stayed, the more she began to sense something off, as though the town had secrets it wasn't willing to share. And now, standing in the middle of it all, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain. The first drop splashed against her cheek, followed by a second, and then another. Soon, the heavens opened, and a steady downpour began, soaking her through. Amelia quickened her pace, eager to get to the safety of her new home. But the storm wasn't letting up. She found herself walking faster and faster, as if the storm was pushing her, urging her forward. The streets grew quieter as the rain fell heavier. The only sound now was the steady, rhythmic pounding of the storm against the earth. But then, something else. She froze. A voice, soft, faint, whispers carried by the wind. Amelia, her name. She spun around, her heart racing, but there was no one there. Only the rain, pouring in sheets, blocking her view. Amelia? The voice came again, this time louder, clearer. She stumbled back, her hands trembling. A chill ran down her spine. Her gaze shot to the empty street, then to the darkened figure that suddenly appeared at the end of the road. A tall, cloaked figure standing in the center of the street, unmoving. "Hello?" she called, her voice quivering. But the figure didn't respond. It simply stood there as if waiting. The rain intensified, as though it was being called by the figure. The wind howled, and for a brief moment, Amelia could swear the mist parted just enough to reveal the outline of a face beneath the cloak, an ancient, worn face that seemed both familiar and completely alien at the same time. The figure stepped forward, its long cloak swirling in the wind, and then the voice came again. "Come find me." Amelia stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat. She knew, without a doubt, that this wasn't just any storm. This was the beginning of something she wasn't prepared for. Something that would change everything she knew about this town and about herself. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The Ghost and the Storm. The next morning, Amelia awoke to a gray sky and the lingering scent of rain in the air. It seemed as though the storm had never truly passed. The mist that hung over Greystone felt thick, almost as if the town itself was caught in some sort of suspended moment, waiting. She could still hear the whispers in her head, soft and haunting. "Come find me." The words echoed through her thoughts, their meaning just out of reach. She tried to shake it off, to tell herself it was nothing but the product of a sleepless night and her overactive imagination. But something in the air, something about this town, gnawed at her. The longer she stayed, the more she felt the weight of the town's strange history pressing in on her. Amelia dressed quickly, hoping a walk through town would clear her mind. As she stepped outside, the first thing that hit her was the silence. It was an eerie kind of quiet, one that felt almost unnatural. The usual sound of a town waking up, the distant hum of traffic, the chatter of locals in their yards, were missing. Instead, all she could hear was the soft patter of the remaining rain on the cobbled streets. She walked slowly down the main road, her boots splashing softly through the puddles. The mist from last night's storm still clung to the buildings, making everything appear slightly out of focus. She paused at the town square, looking around for any signs of life. A few older people sat on benches, their faces weathered and distant, eyes trained on the ground before them. They didn't seem to notice her, or if they didn't acknowledge her presence. Amelia moved to the small cafe at the corner, thinking a cup of coffee might help her gather her thoughts. Inside, the smell of fresh bread and coffee filled the air, the warmth a welcome contrast to the damp chill outside. She ordered her drink and took a seat by the window, watching the mist swirl like a living thing outside. It was then that she saw him, the man from the street. He stood at the far end of the square, just at the edge of the mist, his tall figure barely visible against a gray backdrop. Amelia's heart skipped a beat as she recognized him, the same tall, cloaked figure she had seen the night before. He stood motionless, staring into the distance. His face, still obscured by the hood of his cloak, was hidden from view. Amelia's breath caught in her throat, and she instinctively shrank back from a window. Her pulse quickened. It was him, the Rainkeeper. There was no doubt in her mind. What was he doing here? A voice suddenly broke her trance. The barista, a young woman with kind eyes, smiled at Amelia as she set down her coffee. "Beautiful day, huh?" she said with a light chuckle, though there was a faint hint of unease in her voice. Amelia looked up, trying to shake off the sudden chill that had gripped her. I was just looking at the weather," she said, her voice a little too high-pitched. The barista's smile faltered for just a moment, as if she could sense Amelia's discomfort. "You'll get used to it," she said. "The rain, we don't get much sunshine here. But, well, it's just how things are in Greystone." She paused, as if considering something. "Don't mind the Rainkeeper. He's harmless enough, just a part of the town's history." "Rainkeeper?" Amelia echoed, trying to keep her voice steady. The mention of the name sent a shiver down her spine. The barista nodded, her gaze flicking nervously toward the window. "Yeah, it's an old tale. The spirit of the storm. Some people say he's just a story. Others, well, they say he's real. But don't let the old folks scare you. They're just stuck in the past." She smiled again, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Amelia felt a flicker of unease, but nodded politely. I see. The barista seemed to sense that the conversation was over, and with a small nod, she walked away. But Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, something far beyond just an old story. She glanced back at the square. The figure was gone. In his place, only the heavy mist remained, swirling gently in the breeze. Had she imagined it? Her heart beat faster. No, she hadn't imagined it. The figure had been real. And it wasn't just some ghost story the locals had passed around. He was here. He was real. And somehow, she was tied to him. The rain began to fall again, steady and relentless, drumming against the window like the pulse of something ancient and alive. The voice came to her again, as soft as the whisper of the storm. Come find me. Amelia stood up abruptly, her hands trembling. She couldn't stay here any longer, not when her mind was racing with questions that had no answers. She stepped outside, the mist thickening around her. Her footsteps echoed in the empty street as she made her way toward the center of town. She didn't know where she was going, but she had to find him. She had to understand what was happening, why the rain never seemed to stop, and what it all meant. The storm was calling her, and she was going to answer. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. The Forgotten Debt. Amelia spent the rest of the afternoon wandering the quiet streets of Greystone, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and unease. The town felt like a relic of the past. Each corner, each building hiding stories long forgotten. The fog rolled in thicker as the day wore on, the mist curling around the buildings, cloaking the streets in an almost suffocating embrace. As she walked, her eyes kept flicking back to the square, to where she had seen the Rainkeeper. He hadn't returned, but she couldn't shake the image of him standing there, his presence heavy in the air. She found herself drawn back to the town library, the one place she could think of that might hold some answers. If there was a history to Greystone, surely the library would be the key. The old building stood at the edge of the square, its stone exterior weathered by years of rain and time. A small bell jingled as Amelia pushed open the door, the familiar smell of old paper and dust greeting her as she entered. The librarian, a thin, elderly woman with sharp eyes, looked up from her desk. She didn't say anything at first, just watched Amelia with an almost knowing gaze. Amelia gave a polite nod and began browsing the rows of books, her fingers trailing over the spines as she searched for anything related to the Rainkeeper. The more she thought about it, the more she realized there were too many coincidences for this to be just a superstition. Her eyes landed on a thick leather-bound book, its spine cracked with age. She pulled it off the shelf and sat down at a nearby table. The title, The History of Greystone, seemed innocuous enough, but Amelia had a feeling this book would hold the answers she sought. As she flipped through the pages, she came across a section titled, The Storms of Greystone. The words were old, the ink faded, but the story they told was far from ordinary. In the year 1892, Greystone experienced the longest storm the town had ever seen. It rained for days and weeks and then months, with no sign of the skies ever clearing. The people of the town, desperate and afraid, turned to the old ways. They called upon the Rainkeeper, an ancient spirit said to walk the earth when the rain came to claim what was owed. The Rainkeeper had been bound to the town many generations ago, when a deal had been struck between the town's founders and the spirit of the storm. In exchange for prosperity of Greystone, the people promised to give something of value when the time came, but the dead had been forgotten over the years, and when the storm returned, the spirit came to collect. Those who had lived through the storm spoke of strange happenings, people vanishing, voices calling out in the night, and a figure cloaked in the mist waiting in the streets. It was said that the Rainkeeper did not just take the crops or the town's wealth, but that which was most precious to the people, their lives, their souls, their futures. The town was left in ruins after the storm, but no one spoke of the dead again. Amelia's heart pounded as she read the words. The story sounded too much like the events she had witnessed in the past few days. The storm, the whispers, the figure, it all lined up, but there was something more. The passage mentioned a debt that had been struck long ago, and though the details weren't clear, it seemed that Greystone had forgotten about it. Or perhaps the debt had been buried over time. Amelia's fingers lingered over the next page, which spoke of the Rainkeeper's return. According to the book, the Rainkeeper would return to collect when the time was right, and it seemed that time had come. She turned to the librarian, who had been watching her intently. The old woman's eyes narrowed as Amelia looked up. "Do you know about the Rainkeeper?" Amelia asked, her voice trembling slightly. The librarian didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gave a long, deep sigh, as though this conversation had happened many times before. "You've read it, haven't you?" she asked softly. "The History of Greystone." Amelia nodded, her eyes wide. What happened to the people who didn't repay the debt? The librarian's lips twitched into something that resembled a sad smile. "Some say they were taken by the storm. Others say they became part of it, their souls trapped in the rain forever. But no one knows for sure. The town's been quiet since then. Some would say too quiet, and we've never dared to speak of it again. But why didn't anyone do anything? Why didn't they try to stop it?" The librarian's eyes darkened. Because they couldn't. The Rainkeeper is not a spirit that can be bargained with. Once the debt is set, it must be paid. And if the people of Greystone forgot that, well, they paid the price. Amelia's thoughts raced. She felt as if the weight of the past had descended upon her, and now it was her turn to carry it. The Rainkeeper had returned, and it seemed he had come for her. "Is there any way to make it right?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The librarian looked at her for a long moment, then slowly shook her head. "I don't know, child, but if the Rainkeeper has chosen you, there's no escaping him. He will take what is owed." Amelia stood, her heart racing. She wasn't sure what the next step would be, but one thing was certain: Greystone's past was catching up with her, and the storm was far from over. As she left the library, the rain began to fall again, heavier than before, and the whispers followed her every step. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4, The Telltale Mist. Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that the rain was always there, lurking just beyond the corners of her mind. It had started as an odd, nagging sensation, but now it had grown into something much more persistent, something that pressed against her chest like an invisible weight. The whispers were louder, more insistent. "Come find me." It was as if the storm itself was calling to her. The wind howled through the trees, the rain poured in sheets, and yet there was something comforting about it, something familiar, as though she had always known this was where she belonged. She stood by the window of her small rented house, staring out at the swirling mist that seemed to come from nowhere, pooling like thick smoke in the streets. Greystone, with its old houses and weather-beaten streets, felt even older now, as though the entire town were held in some kind of ancient, timeless spell. The town was empty. Or was it? Amelia's gaze shifted across the square, where the rain had begun to fall in torrents. Her mind raced, replaying the events of the last few days, the strange figure, the library, the ancient debt that had never been repaid. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, but it felt like something was about to happen, something that had been set in motion long before she ever arrived. As the rain picked up, a thought gnawed at her. Maybe she had to find him, to confront the Rainkeeper. Maybe the only way to stop the storm was to go where it all began. Taking a deep breath, Amelia grabbed her coat and left the house, stepping into the wet, misty streets of Greystone. The fog thickened around her with each step, the wet cobblestone slippery beneath her boots. She followed the sound of the wind and the rain, her heart pounding in her chest. The town felt even quieter now, like the storm had swallowed everything whole. She made her way toward the edge of the square, the place where she had first seen the figure. There was no one there now, just the rain beating against the ground and the fog that seemed to obscure the world. The figure, the Rainkeeper, hadn't returned, but the air still felt charged with his presence. Amelia hesitated for a moment, but something deep within her urged her to move forward, to go into the heart of the mist. She walked to the center of the square, where the streets met in a cross, and stopped. And then she saw him. At first, it was just a shadow, a dark figure outlined against the mist. But as the rain slowed, the figure became clearer, his tall, cloaked form standing just beyond the street lamp, his face hidden beneath the hood. He was waiting for her. Amelia's breath hitched. It's him, she thought, the Rainkeeper, the figure she had been drawn to, the one who had come for her. He didn't move, didn't speak, but she could feel his presence in the air, heavy and inevitable like the storm itself. "Why are you here?" Amelia asked, her voice trembling as she stepped forward, not sure what to expect. "What do you want from me?" The figure didn't answer at first. Instead, there was a long pause, and the mist seemed to thicken even more, curling like fingers around her. It was as if the rain itself was waiting for something, for a signal. Finally, the figure lifted his head slightly, and a low, gravelly voice filled the air. "You've come," he said, his words almost drowned by the rain, but clear enough for Amelia to hear. "The debt must be paid, and you are the one who must settle it." Amelia's heart sank. "I don't know what you mean. I didn't make any deal." The Rainkeeper's form shifted slightly, his cloak flowing around him like a shadow. The wind carried his voice again, this time sharper, more intense. "You carry the debt of your ancestors. This town, this place, has bound you to the storm. The price was promised long ago, and now it is time for you to fulfill it." Amelia shook her head, stepping back. "I don't even know what you're talking about." "Why me? Why not someone else?" "Because the storm has returned," the Rainkeeper replied, his voice low and foreboding. "And it knows you. You are the one who will see it through." The mist around her seemed to thicken again, swirling at her feet, as if the storm itself was closing in. Amelia's mind raced, her breath quickening. "The storm knows me? What does that mean?" she asked, her voice cracking. "What do you want me to do?" The figure stood motionless, the rain cascading off his hood, his eyes hidden in shadow. "You must make the choice," he said. "The town must pay for forgotten promises. You are the one who will either break the cycle or become a part of it." Amelia felt the weight of his words sink deep into her chest. A part of it. Her mind swirled with impossible choices she was being asked to make. Could she stop it? Could she end the cycle of debt and destruction that had been promised long ago? The Rainkeeper took a step forward, his shadow stretching out before him. "The storm will not cease until the debt is paid," he intoned. "And you must decide how it will end. Will you be its savior or its victim?" The ground beneath her feet trembled, the rain rising in intensity. The wind howled, and the storm seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest, and for a moment it felt as though the world itself was holding its breath. She had no answers, no way to know what the right choice was. She only knew that the storm, the Rainkeeper, the debt, they had all come for her. And now, it was her turn to face the price. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. A Price to Pay. The storm continued to rage as Amelia trudged back to her small house at the edge of Greystone, the rain now a constant companion, drenching her to the bone. The world around her had become a blur of gray, a swirling vortex of mist and rain that seemed to swallow everything in its path. She felt as though she were walking through a dream, a nightmare, perhaps, one where nothing was certain, and every step brought her closer to an inevitable fate. She couldn't stop thinking about the Rainkeeper's words. "You are the one who must settle the debt." The weight of his statement hung heavy in the air, his presence lingering even after he disappeared into the mist. The storm had chosen her, and now it was up to her to decide how it would end. But how could she make such a decision? What did it even mean to settle a debt that had been made long before she was born? What price would she have to pay? And was it even possible to break the cycle? The thought of confronting the Rainkeeper again filled her with dread, but it also ignited a spark of determination deep within her. She couldn't stand by and let the storm consume everything. But could she really change the course of something so ancient, so deeply entwined with the fabric of Greystone's existence? She reached her house, her hands trembling as she pushed open the door. The warmth of fire inside was a stark contrast to the cold, damp world outside. She took a deep breath, hoping to calm her racing thoughts, but the storm raged on, louder than ever. It was then that she noticed something strange. The room was different. The shadows on the walls, the way the light flickered in the corner of her eye. It was as though the house itself was holding its breath, waiting. The air felt thick, as though the storm had seeped inside, filling the space with its oppressive weight. She approached the fireplace, where the fire was crackling softly. But as she got closer, she realized something was wrong. The flame seemed unnatural. They flicker in a way that didn't quite make sense, dancing in patterns that didn't belong. And then, from the corner of the room, something caught her eye, a figure, standing in the shadows. Amelia froze, her heart leaping into her throat. She knew who it was before she even saw his face. The Rainkeeper. Somehow, he had followed her here. His tall, cloaked form loomed in the corner of the room, his presence as cold and unyielding as the storm outside. "Why are you here?" she demanded, her voice shaking but determined. "I've already spoken to you. What more do you want from me?" The Rainkeeper didn't move. His eyes, still hidden beneath his hood, seemed to pierce through her, and for a moment Amelia felt as though he could see straight into her soul. The room grew colder, the air thick with tension. "You have asked many questions, but there's one you have yet to ask." His voice came, as soft as the whisper of the wind. "The question you must ask yourself." Amelia felt a chill spread through her body, but she stood her ground. "And what is that?" "What will you sacrifice to break the cycle?" The words hit her like a physical blow. She felt them reverberate in her chest, as though they had lodged themselves deep within her. Sacrifice? What could she possibly sacrifice? Her mind raced, searching for an answer, but nothing came. What could she give up to stop the storm, to stop the debt from continuing? "The price," the Rainkeeper continued, his voice low and steady. "The price of breaking the cycle is not one that can be measured in simple terms. It is something that belongs to you, something you hold dear." Amelia felt a wave of panic rise within her. What could he mean? What did she have that was so precious? "The town, the people here, they've already paid for their failure," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What more do I need to give?" The Rainkeeper's gaze never wavered, and his form seemed to blur in the dim light. "It is not just the town's debt. It is yours, too. The storm will not relent until you settle it, until you choose how it will end." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. The storm, the debt, it wasn't just about the town. It was about her. She had been tied to this from the very beginning, whether she had known it or not. "You must choose," the Rainkeeper said, his voice taking on an edge. "You will either accept the debt and carry it, or you will let the storm take everything. Your family's legacy, the town's future. Everything will be consumed by the storm if you refuse to pay the price." The weight of his words settled over her like a heavy fog. Amelia felt herself sinking under pressure. What was the price? What was she supposed to give up to stop the storm? She thought of everything she had, her life, her future, the new start she had come here to find. Could she really give all of that up? Could she sacrifice her happiness, her peace, for the sake of breaking a cycle she didn't even fully understand? The Rainkeeper's figure loomed larger, the shadows growing deeper around him. Amelia knew she had no choice but to face this. But what choice could she make that wouldn't destroy her in the process? "I don't know what to give," Amelia whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know what the price is." The Rainkeeper was silent for a moment. Then he spoke, his voice softer now, almost as if he were speaking to someone who had already made their decision. "Look inside yourself," he said. "The answer is already there. It always has been." And with that, the figure faded into the shadows, leaving Amelia standing alone in the dimly lit room, the storm still raging outside. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. The Shroud of the Past. Amelia sat alone in her house, the fire crackling softly in the hearth, but the warmth seemed to offer no comfort. The storm still raged outside, the wind howling through the trees and the rain falling in endless sheets. It felt as though the world was closing in on her, and every drop of rain, every gust of wind, whispered the debt she was bound to, a debt she still didn't fully understand. She hadn't slept in days, her mind racing with questions and confusion. The Rainkeeper's words haunted her. What will you sacrifice to break the cycle? She had been given a choice, but no matter how many times she replayed the conversation in her mind, the answer remained elusive. What could she possibly give up to stop the storm, to free herself from this ancient debt? Her mind wandered back to the history book she had found at the library, the stories of Greystone's past, the promises made long ago. Her hand reached for the book, still sitting on the table beside her, its pages worn and fragile. She flipped through the pages again, tracing the faded ink with her fingers. It was all so vague, so cryptic. The story of the Rainkeeper, the ancient debt, the promise that had been forgotten by the people of Greystone. But there was something in the book, something that stood out, something that might hold the key to breaking the cycle. She turned to the section she had read earlier, the one about the storm of 1892. Her eyes scanned the lines once more, looking for anything she had missed. The storm had lasted for months, the people of Greystone trapped in an endless downpour. But there was more, something about the promise made, the price that had been paid, and the one who had made it. The text was cryptic, but one phrase caught her attention. The debt was passed down through blood, and the one who holds the key will face the storm when the time comes. Her pulse quickened as the words sank in. The one who holds the key. Amelia felt a cold shiver run down her spine. The storm was hers to stop, hers to break. But she wasn't just tied to the debt of the town. She was bound to it by blood. It wasn't enough to simply understand the debt. She had to face it, confront the past head-on. She had to know more. Without thinking, she stood up, grabbed the book, and made her way out the door. The wind whipped through the streets of Greystone, the mist swirling like a veil over the town. The rain stung her skin, but she barely noticed it as she walked toward the oldest part of town, the cemetery. The cemetery had always felt eerie, a place where time seemed to stand still, the tombstones weathered by years of rain and wind. It was here that the town's founders were buried, and Amelia knew that somewhere among the crumbling stones she would find the answers she sought. As she stepped through the wrought iron gates, the air grew heavier, the storm pressing in from all sides. She could hear the faint rustle of the leaves and the distant sound of the rain hitting the earth. But there was another sound, a soft, almost imperceptible whisper that seemed to come from the very ground beneath her feet. "Come find me?" The voice was faint, but it was there, urging her forward. Amelia's heart raced. She moved deeper into the cemetery, her footsteps muffled by the soft earth. The mist swirled around her, making the tombstones appear like shadowy figures rising from the ground. She stopped in front of an old, weathered stone. The name on it was barely legible, the letters worn away by time. But the inscription still caught her eye. The first to promise, the first to pay. The words seemed to echo in her mind. The first to promise, the first to pay. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. Was this it? The first promise? The beginning of it all? She knelt down, her fingers tracing the worn edges of the stone. Her eyes scanned the inscription again, searching for something, anything that would explain the connection between her family and the Rainkeeper. And then, as if the ground itself had decided to reveal its secrets, the mist parted just enough for her to see the next inscription, etched on the stone next to it. It was clearer, newer, and far more legible. The one who inherits the debt will face the storm and break the curse. You are the key, Amelia. You are the price. Her blood ran cold. She felt the ground beneath her tremble, the rain growing heavier as if the storm was responding to the revelation. The message was clear now. The debt was hers to settle. She was the one who would face the storm, the one who would either break the cycle or be consumed by it. But the last line, the part that said, "You are the key, Amelia, you are the price," filled her with dread. She had never considered that she might be the one to pay the debt, that she might be the one to sacrifice something far greater than she could imagine. As the storm intensified, Amelia stood up, her heart pounding in her chest. She had come here seeking answers, and now she had them. But the answers only raised more questions. What was the price she had to pay? What was she truly willing to give up to break the curse? The storm was waiting. The Rainkeeper was waiting. And now, Amelia knew that the time had come for her to make a choice. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7. The Echoes of the Storm. Amelia stood in the heart of the cemetery, the rain pounding around her, her mind swirling with the weight of the discovery. The words on the tombstone still echoed in her head. You are the key, Amelia. You are the price. What did that mean? She had hoped that by coming here, she would find some clarity, some resolution, but all she had found was a deeper mystery, one that tied her to the past in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. The storm, the debt, the curse. It all led back to her, but she had no idea what the final cost would be. The wind howled through the cemetery, and the rain began to pick up again, soaking her to the bone. But she barely noticed it. Her mind was elsewhere, caught in the web of the past and the present, unsure of how to move forward. She turned back toward the cemetery gate, but as she walked, a new thought struck her, one that made her stop dead in her tracks. What if the debt wasn't just about the town? The Rainkeeper had said it himself. The storm will not cease until you settle it, until you choose how it will end. It wasn't just the town's curse, was it? It was hers. She was the one who had inherited the debt. And if she was truly the key, that meant she had to unlock the storm's resolution. But how? How could she possibly do that? A voice, low and almost inaudible, broke through her thoughts. The wind carried it like a whisper. Amelia? She froze, her heart racing. The voice sounded so familiar, yet so distant. It's him, she realized, the Rainkeeper. He was here. His presence was suffocating, filling the air around her with a heavy silence. She had felt it before, the weight of his gaze, the chill that settled in her bones whenever he was near. She turned slowly, her eyes scanning the mist-shrouded cemetery. And there he was, standing at the far edge of the graveyard, his tall, dark figure barely visible against the backdrop of the storm. "I'm here," Amelia said, her voice trembling, though she didn't know whether it was from the storm or from the fear that was beginning to rise within her. The Rainkeeper didn't move, but his voice carried clearly through the storm. "You have come far, Amelia," he said, his tone still calm and steady, but with a depth that seemed to resonate through the very earth. "But the time has come to make your choice. The debt must be paid, and the storm will not end until you face what you must sacrifice." Amelia's stomach twisted. "What do you mean? What do you want from me?" His figure shifted slightly, and the mist parted just enough for her to see his face. For the first time, his features were fully visible. His eyes, pale and cold, seemed to pierce right through her, their gaze unwavering. "You know the answer already. Amelia, it is not just the town that is cursed. It is you. You were born to bear this burden, to end this cycle." She shook her head, taking a step back. "No, I didn't ask for this. I didn't choose this." The Rainkeeper stepped forward, his presence looming over her, his voice still quiet, but filled with an undeniable power. "You cannot choose your legacy, Amelia," he said, his tone soft yet sharp. "It has been chosen for you. Your bloodline is bound to storm. And now, you must decide whether you will end it or allow it to consume everything." Amelia felt the storm pressing in on her, the air growing thicker, the rain pouring harder. Her heart hammered in her chest as she tried to process everything. The storm, the curse, her family's debt. And the Rainkeeper, was he truly a spirit or something much more? She could feel it, the weight of her ancestors' choices bearing down on her. "What happens if I refuse?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. The Rainkeeper's expression remained unreadable. "Then the storm will continue. It will grow, consuming Greystone, consuming the very land you stand on. And in the end, it will consume you as well." Amelia's hands clenched into fists. The thought of giving into this, of letting the storm destroy everything she had come to know and love, was unbearable. But the idea of making a choice that would end her own life, that seemed impossible. "I can't," she whispered. "I can't sacrifice myself." "Then you will sacrifice something else," the Rainkeeper said, his voice thick with meaning. "The storm takes from you what it needs. It takes what is most precious, what you hold closest. Your choice, Amelia, is not what you are willing to give up, but what you are willing to lose." A cold realization hit her like a slap to the face. The storm wasn't asking for her life. It was asking for something far more painful, something she would have to let go of willingly. It wasn't just about stopping the storm. It was about sacrificing something that defined who she was. Amelia felt the world spinning around her, the rain coming down in torrents, the wind howling through the trees. She had to make a choice. But what could she give up? What could she lose? Her eyes locked onto the Rainkeeper. "What do I need to do?" His expression remained inscrutable, but his voice softened. "You must choose, Amelia. The storm will not stop until you settle the debt." And that choice lies in your hands. End of Chapter 7. Chapter 8. The Deal with the Rainkeeper. The storm raged around Amelia, louder now than it had ever been before. The winds howled through the trees, rattling the windows, and the rain pounded relentlessly against the ground, as though it were trying to break through the very earth itself. Amelia stood in the center of the cemetery, the chilling presence of the Rainkeeper still hovering over her like a shadow, and every drop of rain that fell seemed to press down on her chest. She was shaking, not from the cold, but from the weight of the decision that loomed before her. The storm had never been so powerful, so intense. It felt as if it was responding to her indecision, the very air around her thick with the tension of what had to come next. The Rainkeeper watched her silently, his hooded gaze never leaving her, as though waiting for her to make a move. The wind whipped around them, but it was as if the storm was waiting for her to speak, for her to make the first move in this twisted dance that had already been set in motion long before her arrival. Amelia had never felt more alone. The words of the Rainkeeper echoed in her mind. The storm will not stop until you settle the debt. What are you willing to lose? She had no answers. There was nothing she could think of that she would willingly sacrifice, nothing that could outweigh her life, nothing that could stand against the fear and uncertainty growing within her. But then another thought began to form, a question she had avoided asking herself until now. What if the price was not about loss, but about letting go? Her eyes narrowed as she looked at the Rainkeeper, his form barely visible in the thick fog surrounding them. She swallowed hard, trying to steady her racing heart. "What exactly do you mean by settling the debt?" she asked, her voice a mixture of defiance and desperation. "What am I supposed to do? What do you want from me?" The Rainkeeper's eyes glinted beneath his hood, and his voice came low and steady, like the distant rumble of thunder. "The debt must be settled in full, and it cannot be undone. You were born into this cycle, Amelia. You will either break it or carry it forward. The choice is yours." His words held an ancient, undeniable truth. She could feel the weight of the curse on her shoulders, the knowledge that whatever choice she made would change everything. The wind shifted, and the Rainkeeper stepped closer, his cloak rustling in the wind. The mist swirled around them, closing the distance between them like the hands of fate. "You must offer something to the storm," he continued. "A piece of yourself, something that will release you from this burden. Only then can the cycle be broken." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. The storm? Was he telling her to give something up to stop it? But what could she offer that would make the storm cease? "I don't understand," she whispered, shaking her head. "What can I give you? What do you want?" The Rainkeeper tilted his head, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes, something that wasn't just a cold, unfeeling stare of a spirit. There was a flicker of something else, a spark of understanding, or perhaps pity. "The storm takes what is most precious to you," he said softly, his voice a whisper in the wind. "It takes the one thing you fear losing the most. Only when you are willing to let go of that will the debt be settled." Amelia recoiled. Fear gripped her heart. "The one thing I fear losing the most? What if I can't let it go?" she asked, her voice breaking. "What if I can't make that choice?" The Rainkeeper's voice softened, and for a moment, Amelia thought she saw a hint of sadness in his expression. "Then the storm will consume you. It will take everything, your future, your past, everything you've known. It will drown this town, and you along with it." The rain beat harder against the earth, as though the storm itself was answering him, growing in intensity, its fury unleashed. Amelia's mind raced. The storm had always been tied to Greystone, to the promises made long ago. But now it was tied to her. She was the key, the one who could either stop it or become part of it. And the cost was something she wasn't prepared for, something she couldn't even fathom. She looked at the Rainkeeper, and in that moment, she knew the choice wasn't just about her. It was about everyone in Greystone, everyone she had come to care about. She couldn't let the storm destroy the town, couldn't let it sweep away everything. "I won't let it destroy them," she said, her voice shaking but resolute. "I'll do whatever it takes to stop it." The Rainkeeper's eyes narrowed, but there was no malice in his gaze. He nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting this answer. "The choice is yours, Amelia. The storm will not cease until you choose what you are willing to sacrifice. Amelia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She had come this far. She had to finish what had been started long before she was born. She couldn't run anymore. Then I choose to stop it, she whispered, her heart heavy. I'll face it. I'll face the storm. The wind howled louder, the rain coming down harder, but the Rainkeeper remained still, watching her. Slowly, he began to fade, his form dissolving into the mist, leaving her alone in the storm. The moment he vanished, the rain stopped, the wind died down, the air grew still. For the first time since her arrival in Greystone, Amelia felt a sense of clarity wash over her. She had made her choice. She had chosen to face the storm, to end the cycle, no matter the cost. And now, all that remained was to discover exactly what that cost would be. End of Chapter 8. Chapter 9. The Price of Eternal Rain. The air was thick with the remnants of the storm. The clouds were heavy above, dark and brooding, but the rain had stopped just as suddenly as it had begun. The mist, however, still clung to the streets of Greystone, swirling in eerie spirals as though the town itself were holding its breath. Amelia stood in the center of the cemetery, the place where it all began, the wind whipping around her, but the storm's fury had finally subsided. For the first time in days, the town felt eerily silent. It was as if everything was waiting. The trees stood still, the grass motionless, and the air hung heavy with anticipation. She had made her decision. She had chosen to face the storm, to confront the Rainkeeper's debt, and she knew now that there was no turning back. But the question that still lingered in her mind was one she hadn't been able to answer. What would she have to sacrifice to stop it? What would she lose in order to save Greystone, in order to free herself from the curse that bound her? Her heart pounded in her chest as she walked toward the town center, her footsteps slow and deliberate, the weight of the choice pressing on her shoulders. She had to do it. She had to face whatever lay ahead, but the fear still gnawed at her. Fear of what she might have to give up. As she approached the edge of the square, something caught her eye, a figure, the same dark, cloaked figure she had seen so many times before. It stood at the far end of the square, its silhouette barely visible in the thickening mist. The Rainkeeper. This time, he didn't wait for her to come to him. Instead, he stepped forward, his tall figure emerging from the fog like a shadow coming to life. His presence seemed to make the world hold its breath, the very air around her crackling with an unspoken energy. Amelia took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. She was ready. Whatever the cost, whatever the sacrifice, she was ready to face it. She had chosen this path, and now she had to see it through. The Rainkeeper stopped in front of her, his head casting his face in shadow, but she could feel his eyes upon her, cold and knowing. "You've made your choice," he said, his voice low and steady, a deep echo that seemed to resonate in the air around them. "But you must understand this. The price of ending the cycle is not one that can be taken lightly." Amelia nodded, her jaw clenched, but she didn't speak. She had heard his warning before. She had heard it in the whispers of the storm, in the way the town's history had been handed down like a dark inheritance. She knew what was coming. The Rainkeeper's form seemed to shimmer in the mist, and for a moment, Amelia thought she saw something else, something beyond the shadow of the figure, something ancient and powerful, something that felt as though it had been waiting for centuries. "You were born to this," the Rainkeeper continued, his voice filled with an ancient sadness. "The storm has always been part of you. It is your bloodline that carries the debt, and it is you who must face it. The choice is not just yours, but the town's as well. The storm will be broken, but at a cost." The ground beneath Amelia's feet seemed to shift, and the air grew heavier still. She took another step forward, but the Rainkeeper raised his hand, stopping her in her tracks. "The question remains, Amelia," he said, his voice lowering to a whisper. "What are you willing to lose? The storm will not stop until you make the ultimate sacrifice." Amelia swallowed hard. The fear in her chest had been building ever since she had first encountered him, and now, standing before him, she understood the truth. The storm wasn't just about the town. It wasn't just about Greystone. It was about her, about what she held most dear. The Rainkeeper's eyes glowed faintly beneath the hood, and he stepped closer, his form looming over her. The storm will take what you fear losing the most. It will take what you cannot bear to part with. Your future, your past, your peace. It will take what it must to break the curse. Amelia closed her eyes, her mind racing. She thought of everything she'd come to love in Greystone. The town, the people, the new life she had begun to build. And she thought of what she held closest to her heart. What was it? What was she willing to lose? She had spent so many years running from the past, from the pain she had left behind. She had come to Greystone to start over, to find peace, to escape the weight of her family's history. But now, standing before the Rainkeeper, she realized that she couldn't outrun her past. It was part of her, woven into the very fabric of who she was. "I don't want to lose everything," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "But I can't let this town be destroyed. I can't let it fall into the storm's fury." The Rainkeeper regarded her silently, his eyes narrowing as though he were measuring her resolve. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Then you understand the price." He raised his hand, and the air around them seemed to tremble. The mist swirled faster, the wind howling through the streets, and Amelia felt herself drawn into the center of the storm. It was as though the entire town was alive, the very earth beneath her feet vibrating with the power of the curse. The Rainkeeper's voice echoed through the storm. "The price has been set. You must get what you fear losing the most." The ground beneath Amelia seemed to open up, and she felt herself falling, the darkness swallowing her whole. She gasped for air, but there was nothing but the storm, the darkness, the pressure of the curse pushing in from every side. And then, as if from nowhere, a light appeared. A figure stepped forward, its outline shimmering through the mist. Amelia's breath caught in her throat as the light grew brighter and the figure became clearer. It was her mother. Amelia! Her mother's voice called, soft and warm, but with a sense of urgency. "It's time to make your choice. You can't run from your past. You can't escape who you are." Amelia's heart raced as the storm swirled around her. The light from her mother's figure seemed to push back the darkness. And for the first time since she had arrived in Greystone, Amelia felt a sense of peace. She realized, in that moment, that she didn't need to run anymore. She didn't need to escape her past. She looked up at the Rainkeeper, and her decision was clear. "I choose to face it," she said, her voice steady. "I choose to end this." The storm raged louder, but Amelia stood firm, her heart calm. The price had been paid. End of Chapter 9. Chapter 10. The Chains of the Past. The storm had finally broken. Amelia stood in the heart of the square, the wind beginning to calm, the rain ceasing to fall. Greystone, once drowned in mist and fury, was now eerily silent. The streets, once filled with the pounding of the storm, were quiet, as if the town itself were holding its breath. But the silence was not peaceful. It was heavy, as though the entire world was waiting for something. Waiting for her. Amelia's heart pounded in her chest as she stood alone in the square. The Rainkeeper was gone, the storm had passed, and yet she felt no sense of relief. She had made the choice. She had chosen to face the storm, to break the cycle. But now, standing in the aftermath, she didn't know what to expect next. What would happen to her, to Greystone, now that the storm had subsided? She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but the weight of the past, the legacy she carried, pressed down on her with an almost suffocating force. The curse, the debt, the choices, it was all so much to bear. She had confronted the storm, had made her decision, but the question lingered in her mind. Had I truly broken the cycle, or was this just a calm before another storm? The answer came in the form of a shadow, faint at first, but growing more defined as it approached. Amelia turned, her breath catching in her throat. Standing at the edge of the square, just beyond the mist, was the figure of her mother, the one she had seen before in the light of the storm, her voice guiding Amelia toward this moment. But now, as the mist cleared, Amelia saw that the figure was no longer shimmering. The light that had surrounded her mother was gone, leaving behind only a faint, distant presence. "Mom," Amelia whispered, her voice trembling. Her mother's form was still distant, as though she was part of the fog, a reflection of something once real, but now untouchable. Amelia stepped forward, but the figure did not move. It was as though her mother was waiting for her to come closer, to make sense of what had happened. "You did it!" Her mother's voice came, soft and almost inaudible. "You made the choice. You faced the past." Amelia's chest tightened, a mixture of grief and relief flooding her. "But I don't know what I've done," she said. "I don't know if I've broken the curse. I don't know if I'm free of the storm." Her mother's figure shifted, her form becoming clearer as she took a step toward Amelia. "The storm will always be a part of you, Amelia," she said, her voice filled with an understanding that cut through the silence. "The debt was never truly yours to carry. It was a legacy of those who came before you. But you made the choice. You faced it. And you have freed yourself from the chains of the past." "But what does that mean?" Amelia asked, her voice cracking. "What happens now? What I do?" Her mother's figure softened, her eyes filled with a quiet sadness. "You are free now. Free from the past. Free from the storm. The debt has been paid. The chains have been broken." Amelia felt a wave of emotion crash over her. The storm, the curse, it had all been tied to the past, to the promises made by her ancestors. She had carried the weight of it, but she had made the choice to face it, to stop running from it. And now, for the first time, it felt like she could breathe again. The figure of her mother smiled softly, her form beginning to fade into the mist. "You're not alone, Amelia. You never were. The storm has passed, but your journey is just beginning." Amelia's heart twisted as her mother's figure disappeared into the fog. She reached out, but there was nothing there, only the silence of the town. The weight of her mother's presence remained, but the storm had gone, leaving behind only the echo of a choice made, a legacy broken, and a future uncharted. As the mist began to dissipate, Amelia looked around at the town she had come to call home. Greystone, though weathered by time and storm, stood still. The streets were calm, the air crisp with the promise of something new. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. The storm had passed, and for the first time, she felt free. But even as she stood there, amidst the ruins of the storm, she knew that the choice she had made was only the beginning. The past had been broken, but it would not be forgotten. And now, it was up to her to forge her own path, free from the chains of legacy, free from the storm that had once controlled her life. Amelia took one last look at the square, at the town that had given her a second chance, and stepped forward. The future was uncertain, but it was hers to shape. And for the first time, she was ready. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11. The Coming of the Storm. The rain had stopped, but the air still carried a heavy scent of earth, damp stone, and the lingering echo of the storm that had once consumed Greystone. The town was waking up, but not just from the physical darkness of the tempest. It was waking up from a deep, centuries-old slumber, stretching its limbs, unsure what it had become in the storm's wake. Amelia stood at the edge of the square once again, gazing at the familiar streets, the rows of old brick houses, the tired but enduring architecture of Greystone. It was quieter now, the storm's violence having washed away not just clouds above, but the tension that had gripped the town for so long. But even as she stood there, feeling the cool, crisp air against her skin, a sense of unease lingered, curling in her chest like a snake waiting to strike. Was the storm truly over? Or was it simply waiting for something or someone to stir it once more? She shook her head. No, it had ended. The debt had been paid. The curse had been broken. Or had it? Amelia glanced back at the townspeople, who were beginning to return to their daily routines. Some were cautiously optimistic, their faces lined with relief. Others, however, wore expressions of uncertainty, as though they were still unsure whether the storm's departure had been permanent or just a temporary lull before something far darker would return. The truth was, Amelia didn't have the answers. The past was gone, but its echoes lingered, especially for her. She had made the choice to break the cycle, to stop the storm, but in doing so, she had lost something, a piece of herself that could never be recovered. The price of breaking the curse had been high, and even now, she felt the weight of that sacrifice. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft sound of footsteps approaching from behind. She turned to see Thomas Wells, the mayor, his face calm but strained, as if something weighed heavily on him. "Amelia," he said, his voice low but steady. "We need to talk." She nodded, sensing the seriousness in his tone. She followed him as he led her toward the town hall, a small, weathered building at the center of Greystone. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the only sound a faint hum of the wind against the walls. The walls were lined with old papers, town records, and a map of the area that had clearly been here for generations. Thomas closed the door behind them, his gaze lingering on her for a moment before he spoke again. "We've been gathering information," he began, his voice measured. "And there's something you need to know." Amelia frowned. "What is it?" He hesitated, as though choosing his words carefully. "The storm may have passed, but something else is coming. Something we didn't account for." Her pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "The storm was the curse, wasn't it? It was tied to the debt, to the town's past. It's over. It's finished." Thomas shook his head, the lines on his face deepening with concern. "I wish that were true. But we've been looking through the records, the old journals, the town's history, and there's something we missed. Something we didn't understand before." Amelia's heart thudded in her chest. "What are you talking about?" Thomas gestured to the map on the wall. "Look here. The town was founded in the 1800s, yes. But the origins of the curse, of the debt, go much further back, long before Greystone was even a town." Amelia stepped closer to the map, her brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" He pointed to an area near the edge of the town, an area she hadn't paid much attention to before, an old, forgotten part of Greystone, marked only by faded lines and scribbled notes. "There's a reason the storm came in the first place. There's a deeper source to the curse, and we didn't realize it until now. We thought it was just a promise, the debt, the cycle of retribution. But it's more than that." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. "What is it?" Thomas paused, his face grim. "It's tied to the land itself. The storm didn't come because of the debt alone. It came because the land has been holding something. Something old. Something powerful." She stared at him, her thoughts racing. "And now it's waking up?" Thomas nodded slowly. "Yes. And if we don't stop it, the storm will return. Only this time, it won't just be the rain. It'll be something far worse." Amelia took a step back, trying to process everything he was saying. It felt like the ground beneath her was shifting, the town she had come to know unraveling before her eyes. "There's something buried beneath Greystone," Thomas continued. "Something tied to the very foundations of the town. The curse, the debt, it was just a symptom of what was really happening. The storm was only the beginning." Amelia's mind reeled. "What do we do?" "We need to find out what it is," Thomas said, his voice low but urgent. "We need to uncover what's buried here, and we need to do it before it's too late." She looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. "Where do we start?" Thomas looked at her with a mixture of fear and determination. "We start at the beginning. We go back, before the town was founded, before the curse even began. We uncover the truth, and we stop whatever it is before it takes hold of us again." Amelia nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle deep within her. The storm might have passed, but something far darker was on the horizon. The land that had given birth to Greystone was hiding its secrets, and it was up to her and the people of Greystone to unearth them before it was too late. End of Chapter 11. Chapter 12. The Storm's End. Amelia had barely slept the night before. The weight of the conversation with Thomas lingered in her mind, gnawing at her with an intensity she couldn't ignore. She had thought the storm had ended with her decision, the debt paid, the curse broken. But now she understood that the true source of the curse wasn't just the storm or the debt, but something buried far deeper within the land itself. And now, that something was waking up. She stood at the edge of Greystone, staring out over the vast expanse of the surrounding woods. The town had always been surrounded by trees, rolling hills, and wild land, but there was a part of the forest, old, forgotten, and abandoned, that seemed to call to her, as if the land itself was pulling her toward it. The place that Thomas had pointed out on the map, the place she had never paid attention to before. Amelia wasn't sure what she was looking for, but she knew this was where it all began. If the storm had truly been just a symptom of a deeper problem, then this forest, this land, was where the solution and the danger lay. With resolve settling over her, She turned and walked toward the old town hall. It was a small, weathered building at the center of town, but it was there that the answers would begin to unfold. She had to know what lay buried beneath Greystone, what the land was hiding. Inside the hall, Thomas was waiting. His face was drawn tight with concern, but there was a spark of determination in his eyes. "I've been looking through more records," he said quietly as soon as she stepped inside. "The earliest settlers to Greystone didn't just come for the land. They came here for something else, something they found buried deep in the earth." Amelia nodded, feeling a chill settle in her bones. "I know. We need to go out there, to the place I saw on the map. It's the only way to figure out what's really going on." Thomas stood up, straightening his shoulders. "We'll need to prepare. Whatever's buried out there, whatever is waking up, it won't be easy to deal with." Amelia felt a heavy lump form in her throat. "I'm ready. We have no choice. If we don't do this, Greystone won't survive it." Thomas led her through the back door of the town hall, past a small storage area filled with town supplies, and out into the growing daylight. The air still carried the residue of the storm, the smell of wet earth and the sense of something unfinished. Together, they made their way toward the edge of the woods, the trees looming ahead like silent sentinels. As they approached, Amelia felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Something in the air had shifted. She could feel it. The ground seemed different here, as if it had been marked by something far older than any of them realized. Thomas stopped at the edge of the trees, his gaze focused ahead. "This is it," he said. "We need to be careful." They stepped into the forest, the canopy above them dense with branches that blocked out most of the sunlight. The deeper they went, the quieter it became. The sounds of the town, of the world outside, seemed to vanish, leaving only the eerie silence of the woods. They reached a clearing after what felt like an eternity, and Amelia stopped dead in her tracks. Before them was an old stone structure, half buried beneath the soil and overgrown with ivy and moss. The stones looked ancient, older than anything she had seen before in Greystone. It was as though time had forgotten this place, forgotten this part of the town's history. "This is where it all began," Thomas whispered, his voice filled with awe and trepidation. Amelia stepped forward, her heart racing. There was a feeling in the air, a tension that seemed to press against her skin. The stone structure, whatever it was, felt wrong, as if it had been waiting for them. She knelt down, brushing the ivy aside, and uncovered an inscription carved into the stone. The letters were faded, but just visible enough for her to read. "Here the storm began, and here it shall end. The price must be paid in full, and the land shall bear witness." A chill ran through her body. The words were clear. The storm, the curse, had always been tied to this place. This land had been the source of the debt, the origin of the storm that had plagued Greystone for generations. But what did it mean? What price had to be paid? And why had this place been hidden away, buried beneath the earth? Thomas stepped forward, his eyes scanning the structure. "We need to find what's buried here. It's the only way to understand what the land is holding." Amelia nodded, feeling her pulse quicken. She didn't know what they would uncover, but she knew that whatever it was the final piece to the puzzle. The storm had come to collect a debt. The land was tied to it. And now it was time to settle the score. Together, they began to carefully clear the debris around the structure, pulling aside moss-covered stones and breaking away thick vines. As they worked, the air grew heavier, as though the land itself was resisting their efforts, unwilling to give up its secrets. Finally, after what felt like hours, they uncovered a large stone slab, its surface engraved with more symbols that were unlike anything Amelia had seen before. They were ancient, like something out of a forgotten language, and as her fingers brushed over them, a cold sensation shot through her body. Thomas stepped back, his face pale. "This isn't just a marker," he said, his voice trembling. "This is the source of the storm. The curse, it's tied to this place. The land is holding something powerful." Amelia's heart raced as she realized the truth. The storm, the curse, the debt, it was all connected to the land, to the very earth that Greystone had been built on. And now they had uncovered the key to ending it. But as she stood there, staring at the stone slab, she knew there was one final choice to make. Whatever was buried here, whatever had been hidden beneath the earth for so long, would demand a price. The storm had taken so much. What would it take now? Amelia took a deep breath. The price would be steep, but if this was the only way to end it, she was ready to pay. End of Chapter 12. Chapter 13. The Last Raindrop. Amelia stood over the ancient stone slab, the weight of the moment pressing down on her like the storm had pressed against gray stone for so long. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with the remnants of the storm, and the silence of the woods fell heavy, suffocating even. It was as though the earth itself was holding its breath, waiting for the final act to unfold. The stone slab before her was unlike anything she had ever seen. The symbols etched into its surface seemed to pulse with a faint, almost imperceptible glow. As her fingers brushed over the cold stone, she felt a jolt of energy rush through her, a surge of power that made her heart race. This was it. This was the source, the place where everything had begun. This is the heart of it, Thomas said quietly, standing just behind her. His voice was low, reverent, almost afraid. The storm wasn't just a storm. It was a seal, a curse bound to the land. And this is where it all starts. Amelia nodded, though her mind was racing. The storm, the curse, the debt, it had all been leading to this moment, to this stone. But what did it mean? What was she supposed to do now? The symbols were ancient, unreadable to her, but they seemed to resonate with something deep inside her, something she couldn't quite explain. Thomas stepped forward, studying the slab more closely. The town's founders, they must have known about this. They must have made a deal with whatever is buried here. And over time, that debt became the storm, the price of keeping the land's power in check. Amelia swallowed hard. She could feel it now. The pull of the land, the weight of the debt that had been passed down through generations. It wasn't just a matter of breaking the storm or the curse anymore. It was about confronting the source, the heart of the land itself. She had always believed the storm was the curse, but the truth was more complicated than that. The storm was only the manifestation, the outward sign of a much deeper, darker power tied to the land, tied to Greystone. And now, she was standing at its threshold. The symbols on the stone slab shimmered in the dim light, and Amelia felt an irresistible urge to touch them. She knew this was it, the final step, the final choice. I have to do this, she murmured to herself, her hand trembling as she reached out to touch the stone. As her fingers made contact with the symbols, a sudden, sharp pulse of energy surged through her, and for a moment, the world around her seemed to vanish. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and the air crackled with static electricity. She gasped, but the pulse wasn't painful. It was a connection, a bond. The symbols on the stone glowed brighter, illuminating the clearing in a soft, eerie light. Amelia's vision blurred, and for a fleeting moment, she saw flashes, images of the town, of the people who had lived here, of the sacrifices that had been made over the centuries. She saw the founders of Greystone, their faces etched with fear and resolve as they made their pact with whatever dark force lay beneath the land. And then she saw herself. Her ancestors, her bloodline, had made the pact, had sealed the debt with the land. She had been born into it, the last in a long line of those destined to face it. The truth hit her like a tidal wave. She was the final piece, the last descendant of the bloodline chosen to either end the storm or let it consume everything. Amelia stepped back, her breath shallow. "What do I have to do?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "What is it that I have to give?" The Rainkeeper's voice, low and resonant, seemed to fill the space around her, as if it had been waiting for this moment. "You must offer what you fear losing the most. The price must be paid in full." Her mind raced. The storm, the curse, it all came back to her now. She had chosen to face it. But what was it that she feared most? What could she give up to end this, to finally release Greystone from its bond to the land? "I can't lose everything," she whispered to herself. "I can't." The words hung in the air, a quiet plea, and then, without warning, the ground beneath her feet shook. The stone slab cracked open, revealing a hollow space beneath it. Amelia recoiled in fear, but Thomas stepped forward, his hand resting on her shoulder. "It's okay," he said softly. "This is it. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together." Amelia nodded, though her heart was still pounding in her chest. She had made the choice. She had chosen to break the cycle, but the cost was not just physical. It was something deeper, something she had to face within herself. She knelt down beside the cracked stone, peering into the hollow beneath it. There in the depths of the earth, she saw it, an object, shimmering faintly in the dark. She reached into the hollow, her fingers brushing against something cold and smooth. It was an ancient weathered stone, a key, perhaps. It felt like it belonged to another time, another world. As her hand closed around it, a voice echoed in her mind, the voice of her ancestors, the voice of the Rainkeeper. This is the price. Amelia gasped, her hand tightening around the stone. She didn't know what she was meant to do with it, but she knew, deep down, that this was the final piece of the puzzle. This was what had been buried beneath Greystone for centuries, the thing that had held the storm in check. And now, she held it in her hand. With the key in her grasp, the earth around her seemed to tremble once again. The storm's energy built, rising around her like a force of nature. But she didn't flinch. This time, she was ready. She had made her choice. End of Chapter 13. Chapter 14, The Legacy of the Rainkeeper. Amelia stood there, the key clenched tightly in her hand, staring down at the ancient stone slab. The storm had calmed, but something still simmered beneath the surface, a tension in the air that she could feel deep in her bones. The storm might have passed, but the land still carried its weight, its power, its curse. And now, it was up to her to settle the debt once and for all. The key was cool to the touch, its surface worn smooth by time. It felt heavy in her palm, as if it held the weight of centuries of history. It had been buried here, hidden deep beneath the earth, waiting for this moment, waiting for her. She couldn't escape the feeling that she wasn't just holding a physical object, but a symbol of everything that had led to this moment. The promises, the sacrifices, the debt that had been passed down through generations. Thomas stood a few steps behind her, his gaze fixed on the stone slab, the crack now wide enough to reveal the key's resting place beneath. He said nothing, but the silence between them spoke volumes. They both knew what had to be done, but neither of them fully understood the consequences. "Do you think it will work?" Amelia asked, her voice quiet, barely more than a whisper, as though speaking too loudly might shatter the fragile calm that had settled over the woods. Thomas didn't answer right away. He took a step closer, his brow furrowed, his eyes scanning the ground around them. "I don't know, but you've come this far. You've faced a storm, and you've broken the curse of Greystone. This is the last step." Amelia nodded, though her heart felt like it was about to burst from her chest. She had faced a storm, and she had chosen to break the cycle. But what would the key unlock? What was the final cost? The price she would pay to set Greystone free? She slowly lowered herself to the ground, the stone slab beneath her trembling with the power of the storm still lingering in the earth. The air seemed to grow heavier, thick with anticipation. Everything she had done, everything she had sacrificed, had led to this moment. She was standing at the threshold of Greystone's future, her future, and the future of the land itself. With trembling fingers, she placed a key into the crack in the stone. It slid in with ease, as though it had always belonged there. The moment it clicked into place, the earth beneath them shuddered, a low rumble vibrating through the ground. Amelia felt it deep in her bones. The land reacting, responding to the power that had been unleashed. The storm's energy surged around them, the air crackling with electricity. The wind began to pick up again, but it was different this time. It wasn't the violent, chaotic energy of the storm that had raged over Greystone for days. This was calmer, almost controlled, like the storm was waiting for something, for the final command. Amelia took a deep breath, her mind racing. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The storm was still there, deep within the land, within her. The key had unlocked something. But what? What had she truly unleashed? And then, as if in answer to her question, a figure appeared before her, stepping out of the swirling mist. It was the Rainkeeper, his form more solid now, more defined than ever before. His cloak billowed in the wind, but his eyes were not cold and distant this time. There was something almost human about them, and in his gaze, she saw a flicker of recognition. "You've done it," the Rainkeeper said, his voice deep, but tinged with something softer, something like pride. "You've broken the cycle." Amelia felt her heart race, her breath catching in her throat. "But at what cost?" she asked. "What do I have to give up?" The Rainkeeper stepped closer, his figure towering over her, but there was no malice in his presence now. He looked at her with something that resembled gratitude. "You've paid the price already. Your sacrifice, your willingness to face the storm, was what broke the curse. But you did not do it alone." Amelia looked around at the forest, at the town she had come to love. "What does that mean? Is it over? Will the storm return?" "The storm will not return," the Rainkeeper said softly. "The land is free. But you, Amelia, you are the one who chose to end it. You are the one who faced the storm, who broke the chains. And because of that, Greystone will be free to heal. But you, too, will change." Amelia swallowed, the weight of his words settling deep in her chest. "I understand," she said, though the understanding came with an ache, a sharp pang of realization that something within her had shifted irrevocably. The Rainkeeper turned away, his form beginning to fade into the mist. "Your journey is not over. You've broken the storm, but you've also opened a new door. The land is yours to shape now, and the future of Greystone will be your legacy." Amelia watched as he disappeared into the fog, his form blending with the landscape, until all that remained was a lingering presence of storm's energy, now dissipating into the earth. The key had done its job, and the cycle had been broken. She stood there for a long moment, letting the weight of what had happened sink in. She had faced the storm, had made the sacrifice, and had ended the curse that had bound Greystone for generations. And now, with the storm's departure, the land was free, but she was different now, too. She had been chained by the storm, by the choice she had made. There was no going back. Greystone was free, but what about her? What did she do now? Amelia turned away from the stone, the key still warm in her hand. It was a new beginning for the town, for the land, and for herself. The storm was gone, but its echoes would remain in her heart, in the earth, in the very bones of Greystone. And though the storm's end marked the close of one chapter, it was also the start of another. She had broken the cycle. Now it was time to build something new. End of chapter 14. The rain had stopped, but its echoes still reverberated in the hearts of the people of Greystone. The small town was no longer haunted by the storms that once ravaged it, no longer burdened by the long, fear-laden nights of relentless downpours. Everything had changed, but that change didn't come just from the passing of the storms. It came from the strength of a decision, from the sacrifice made. Amelia stood in the center of Greystone, gazing out at the fields and streets that still bore the marks of the storm's wake. She had chosen the hardest path, facing a past that generations had fled from, in order to break a cycle that had no escape. But the price wasn't just what she had lost. It was the strength she had found within herself, the resilience and courage to free not just herself, but an entire community from the shadow of the past. Now, Greystone was no longer a place haunted by curses, no longer the land where the ghosts of history roamed free. Every road, every house, every garden began to open up to a new future, a future crafted by its people and by Amelia herself. Amelia knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. All that she had done, all that she had sacrificed, couldn't erase the past completely. But she had freed herself and the town from the storm of broken promises, and from that moment, she could build anew, with the key still firmly gripped in her hand. She knew she would never forget what had happened, but she also understood that, though the storm had passed, life would go on, and just like the town, she would continue to move forward, no matter the challenges ahead, with faith in a brighter future. "The storm has ended," she whispered to herself, "and a new chapter begins." The end.